remember that night as if the air itself turned sharp around me. It was a few days before Christmas, and the house smelled faintly of cinnamon candles mixed with the warmth of laundry tumbling in the dryer. I was folding towels in the small utility room, the hum of the machine steady like background music I'd grown used to. My hands moved automatically, smooth and practiced, when suddenly the sound of voices drifted through the cracked door. At first, I wasn't listening. I thought it was just Jason and Emily chatting about their plans. But then the words reached me, words I wish I could unhear. My son, the boy I raised, the man I once thought was my pride, lowered his voice and said that the greatest gift this Christmas would be if I were gone. Not just gone dead. The towel I was holding slipped through my fingers. For a moment, it didn't feel like cotton, but stone, heavy enough to drag me down. My chest tightened as if the air itself had turned poisonous. I waited for a laugh, for some hint of sarcasm, but there was nothing playful in his tone. And Emily? Her response carried no shock, just a flat acceptance, almost casual, as though my existence was a burden they had been carrying too long. I stood frozen in that small laundry room, the hum of the dryer suddenly cruel in its normalcy. How could a machine keep moving when my world had just stopped? My legs shook, and I had to steady myself against the counter. The silence after their voices faded was heavier than the words themselves. I tried to tell myself I had misheard, but I knew better. I had spent 62 years of my life listening carefully, listening to children in classrooms where I taught, listening to Jason when he was little and scared, listening to the world around me with patience. I knew what I had heard. I moved quietly, almost mechanically, climbing the stairs to the room they let me stay in, the so-called guest suite. It had always felt like a place for an intruder, not a home. No pictures of me, no warmth, just faded curtains and furniture chosen by someone else. I sat on the edge of the bed, my knees trembling, and let the truth echo in my head. My own child wished me gone. The walls seemed to close in around me, as if they too were whispering that I didn't belong. I pressed my hands into my lap, trying to stop them from shaking. But my body betrayed me. My heart pounded so loud, I was afraid they might hear it downstairs. How could Jason, the boy who once clung to me in the dark when storms scared him, now see me as nothing but a burden? I thought of the nights I stayed up rocking his babies to sleep so he and Emily could rest. I thought of the years I had given, the sacrifices I had made. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. All of it had vanished into invisibility. To them, I was not love. I was obligation. I lay back against the headboard, staring at the ceiling. My breath was shallow, my chest aching, but no tears came. It wasn't sadness yet. It was something colder, hollower. The silence was sharp enough to cut. I kept asking myself, if your own child wished you gone, what would you do? Would you confront them? Would you collapse under the weight of it? Or would you gather the broken pieces of yourself and hold them close, refusing to let them shatter you completely? I didn't know the answer then. All I knew was that the world had shifted in a single sentence, and nothing could return to what it was before. That night, I lay awake listening to the muffled laughter from downstairs, laughter that sounded so foreign now. My eyes drifted to the closet, where my suitcases still sat untouched, their tags from long-forgotten trips still hanging. I realized that even though I had been living in that house, I had never truly belonged. And as the night stretched on, one thought grew louder, pulsing in my mind. This betrayal was not born in a single moment. It had been building for years, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. I just hadn't wanted to see it until now. I lay in that quiet guest room, the echo of Jason's words still clinging to me like smoke, and my mind drifted backward. Betrayal never begins in one instant. It builds slowly, hidden beneath layers of choices we tell ourselves are made for love. I thought of the house Richard and I built together after we married, the one where Jason grew up. The walls carried our laughter. The kitchen smelled of Sunday roasts, and the garden was filled with the roses I tended every spring. After Richard passed, I kept the house for years, even when it felt too big for me alone. It was my anchor, the last piece of him. And then one day, Jason asked for help. He and Emily wanted a bigger house, a fresh start, something they said would be better for the children they hoped to have. I told myself it was right to let go, that my son's future mattered more than bricks and memories. So I sold it. Every beam, every window, every corner soaked with my history, and I handed over $12,000 to make their dream possible. I never told anyone how quiet my new life felt in a small rented apartment, how the silence sometimes pressed in on me. But when I saw Jason smile as he signed the deed to his home, I convinced myself it was worth it. Then there was the trip, my lifelong dream of seeing Paris. Richard and I used to talk about it, late at night, when we thought we had endless years ahead. After he passed, I held on to the hope that I would go one day, carry his memory with me under the lights of that city. I had even booked the cruise across the Atlantic, a way to finally breathe again. But the year Jason lost his job, I canceled it. I told myself I could always travel later. I handed him the money I had saved, and I tucked away the little suitcase I had bought for the journey. It is still in my closet, the tags yellowing with time. There were the smaller things too, the thousands of unnoticed gestures that filled the cracks of their lives. Grocery bags carried in week after week. My pantry always a little emptier so theirs would be full. Electric bills quietly paid when they said the budget was tight. Babysitting that stretched into whole weekends. Rocking my grandbabies to sleep so Emily could go out, or so Jason could rest. I never complained. I told myself this is what mothers do. This is what love looks like. And for years, I believed that love would circle back, that gratitude would rise naturally like the tide. I imagined Jason looking at me one day, seeing not just the woman who gave birth to him, but the woman who gave up so much of herself to see him stand tall. But as I sat there on that stiff guest bed, replaying the sound of his voice wishing me gone, the truth settled heavy in my chest. Love without gratitude does not fill you, it drains you. Every sacrifice I had made, every piece of myself I had handed over, had not built a bridge between us. It had carved a chasm I didn't want to see. The warmth of my memories, Jason running into my arms after school, Richard's hand brushing mine as we planted roses, now felt tinged with bitterness. Not because the love wasn't real, but because somewhere along the way, that love became a one-way current. I pressed my palm against the suitcase still sitting in the closet. It was a reminder of all I had set aside, waiting for a gratitude that never came. My sacrifices had not been invisible, they had simply been consumed. And as I sat there, letting these truths unravel inside me, another thought crept in, sharp and undeniable. If they could disregard the love I had poured into their lives so easily, what else had they taken? without me seeing. The morning after those words cut through me. I tried to carry on as if nothing had happened. I brewed coffee, folded laundry, smiled faintly at the kids. On the surface, I played my part, but inside, I carried a bruise no one could see. Back upstairs, I opened the desk drawer where I kept old mail. An envelope from the mortgage company sat near the top, unopened. My stomach tightened as I slid a finger under the flap. The notice was blunt, 3 months past due. The house, the one I had emptied my savings for, was already on the edge of foreclosure. My hands trembled as I pulled my laptop closer. I rarely logged in, but something pushed me to look. When I opened the joint account I had set up for emergencies, the numbers hit me like a slap. Almost nothing was left. Quiet withdrawals had been made week after week, not for medical crises or disasters, but for groceries, gas, even vacations. Over the years, thousands had vanished. I realized I had stopped checking long ago, trusting Jason when he said they used it sparingly. Trust had blinded me. What I thought was a safety net had become their private allowance. My throat went dry. Every time I thought I was being generous covering bills, filling their fridge, it wasn't kindness. It was covering their overspending. I left the room and stood near the stairwell, heart pounding as voices drifted up from below. Jason's voice was low, tense. He was saying the emergency account was empty. Emily's reply was almost casual, as though it were no surprise. Then she mentioned another account mine, the one I used for Christmas gifts. Jason muttered that he couldn't take from me again, but there was no outrage in his tone. Only hesitation. The kind of pause that meant he was already considering it. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. Their betrayal wasn't just in whispered wishes anymore. It was here, in overdue bills and secret plans to bleed me dry. Back in my room, I pulled open the bottom drawer of my dresser. Inside was a folder I hadn't touched in years. Richard, my late husband, had always insisted we keep copies of everything: mortgage papers, legal agreements, deeds. I used to tease him for being overly cautious, but tonight I silently thanked him. I flipped through page after page until I found the deed to this very house. My name was still there, printed clearly, alongside Jason's, a co-ownership agreement, notarized, never revoked. He had promised years ago to take me off the paperwork, to make it his and Emily's alone, but he had never followed through. I whispered the words out loud to myself, as though saying them would make them real. I still own 40% of this house. The shock of it spread through me like a current. For so long, I had felt powerless, just a woman giving, sacrificing, shrinking. But here, in my hands, was proof that I wasn't invisible, that I hadn't erased myself completely, that some piece of my life, of my worth, still remained tied to this place. The realization cut through the haze of betrayal. For the first time in years, I felt something other than despair. Beneath the ache, a spark stirred. I wasn't powerless after all. And in that moment, I began to understand the same documents I had once tucked away as dusty records might now be the key to reclaiming my life. The folder with the deed stayed on my lap long after I first read it. My name, still there, clear as day. For years, I had felt erased, yet that simple line of ink told me I wasn't gone, not yet. I needed someone I could trust to confirm it, so I picked up the phone and called Sophia Miller, the lawyer Richard and I had relied on for decades. Her voice hadn't changed. Steady, professional, kind. She told me without hesitation, yes, the paperwork was valid. Jason had never filed the removal, and I had never signed a release. I still owned 40% of the house. 40%. That number pulsed in my head like a drumbeat. Proof that I still had a say, that I still mattered. I hung up and sat in silence, the weight inside me shifting. For so long, I had been on the defensive, absorbing every slight, every dismissal. Now, for the first time, I felt the ground tilt back under my feet. I wasn't just the victim of their neglect and greed. I had leverage. I had choices. That night, I pulled the suitcase from the closet. It had been gathering dust for 3 years, the tag from my canceled cruise still dangling. I set it on the bed and unzipped it slowly, as though opening a door into another version of myself. One by one, I folded sweaters and blouses, stacking them neatly. Each fold felt like closing a chapter. I packed my passport, the small tin box where I kept Richard's watch, and the envelope labeled Plan B in his handwriting. His foresight, something I had once teased him for, was now my lifeline. As I packed, my gaze fell on the framed picture of my grandchildren on the dresser. Their smiles softened the hardness in my chest. They were innocent in all of this. They hadn't asked for any of it. And though I knew I had to walk away from this house, I couldn't walk away from them without leaving something behind. I sat at the desk with a stack of plain brown envelopes and began to write. My handwriting shook at first, but soon steadied. I told each grandchild a story about baking pies together. Bedtime tales whispered in the dark, the sound of their laughter when I chased them in the yard. I reminded them that none of this was their fault. I ended every letter the same way: you are loved. Always. Folding those notes and tucking them into the envelopes was harder than packing the suitcase. They were pieces of my heart I couldn't carry with me. So I left them in words, a promise that even distance couldn't erase. When the letters were done, I slid them under their gifts and placed them gently in a bag to set beneath the tree on Christmas Eve. No ribbons, no glitter, just truth wrapped in brown paper. Finally, I sat with the documents Sophia had sent me, a notice of intent to sell, prepared and ready. All I had to do was deliver it. I ran my fingers over Richard's handwriting on the old envelope again, remembering his words, "Trust people with your heart, not your money." Back then, I had thought it was cynical. Now, I knew it was wisdom. By the time I closed the suitcase, the fear that had ruled me for so long had ebbed. In its place was resolve, quiet, steady, undeniable. I wasn't running away in shame. I was walking out with dignity. For the first time in years, I felt ready. Ready for the storm that would come when Jason and Emily realized I wasn't their silent safety net anymore. Ready to face the fallout not with shouting or revenge, but with calm certainty. I placed the packed suitcase by the door, exhaled slowly, and whispered to myself enough. Christmas Eve dawned gray and brittle, the kind of morning where even the air felt heavy with something unspoken. I knew what was coming. The notice Sophia had prepared had already been sent. By noon, Jason and Emily would know. I didn't have to wait long. From upstairs, I heard the slam of a door, hurried footsteps, and Jason's voice, sharp and panicked. Papers rustled. Emily's tone cut through the house like glass, demanding explanations. Their voices rose and tangled, anger mixing with fear. I sat quietly in my room, hands folded in my lap, listening as the cracks widened in the life they had built on my back. Then, almost as if the universe wanted to underscore the truth, the power flickered. The Christmas tree lights went dark. The hum of the refrigerator stilled. Silence settled for a beat before panic replaced it. Jason cursed, scrambling with his phone, and Emily's voice turned shrill, insisting something had to be done immediately. I heard her footsteps storming toward me before she even reached the top of the stairs. The door to my room burst open. She didn't bother knocking. Her eyes were wild, her words sharp, demanding to know if I had canceled payments, if I had cut them off. I stayed seated, my voice steady, my hands still. Inside, my heart beat calmly, the way it does when a storm has finally broken and the air clears. I told her, not with anger, but with truth, that I was done. Done paying for a life they had built on my sacrifices. Done keeping the lights on in a house where I was treated as invisible. The silence after those words was heavier than any scream. Emily stared at me, stunned, her mouth opening and closing as though the ground beneath her had given way. Jason came in next, his face pale, the notice from Sophia crumpled in his hand. His voice cracked as he asked how I could do this, how I could leave them drowning now. For a moment, I saw not the man, but the boy I once carried, desperate and scared. But the difference was clear. His fear wasn't about losing me, it was about losing what I provided. I felt no need to argue, no need to defend myself. Calmly, I told him the truth I had been swallowing for years, that I had been more wallet than mother, more babysitter than family. And when he tried to deny it, I reminded him of the words he had spoken just days ago. Words I would never forget. His shoulders slumped, his eyes dropped, but I didn't feel pity anymore. I felt release. Downstairs, the tree stood in darkness, the gifts beneath it catching what little daylight filtered in through the windows. The house, once loud with their laughter, now rang with tension and blame. They argued with each other, pointing fingers, desperate to find someone to carry the weight. But I didn't carry it anymore. For years, I had been unraveling while they thrived. Now, as they scrambled in panic, I felt steady for the first time in a long while. Their chaos was no longer mine to manage. I walked to the window and looked out at the snow beginning to fall, soft and steady, blanketing the ground in white. The world felt quiet, almost peaceful. Behind me, their voices still raged, but they no longer pierced me. The storm had begun. Yes, but this time, it wasn't tearing me apart. It was clearing the path ahead. Christmas morning arrived cloaked in silence. The house was cold, darker than it should have been, the electricity still cut from unpaid bills. I rose before dawn, pulling on my coat, and wheeled my small suitcase to the door. Every step was deliberate, every motion steady. Before leaving, I walked quietly to the living room. The Christmas tree stood in shadow, its ornaments catching faint streaks of early light from the window. Beneath it, I knelt and placed 3 small packages wrapped in plain brown paper. Each one held a gift for my grandchildren, with the letters I had written tucked safely inside. They were not expensive, not shiny, but they carried something more precious than toys' words of love, a reminder that they were never to blame for the choices of their parents. I pressed my hand gently against each package, whispering a silent promise they would never hear, that my love for them would outlive the walls of this house. Then I rose, steadying myself, and turned toward the door. The shuttle arrived at 4 o'clock sharp. Snowflakes drifted through the air as I stepped outside, the crunch beneath my shoes echoing louder than the chaos I left behind. I glanced back once at the house. No light glowed from within. No warmth spilled onto the porch. It stood there like an empty shell, a monument to promises never kept. I did not feel sorrow as much as release. At the airport, I moved through the motions quietly, ticket in hand, suitcase gliding behind me, security checks, the shuffle of boarding. When the plane finally lifted off, I pressed my forehead against the cool window and watched as the ground below disappeared into neat squares of snow and trees. I did not cry. Not when the engines roared, not when the seatbelt sign dinged, not when the clouds swallowed the land. Hours later, I stepped onto the streets of Paris. The city glowed with holiday lights, music drifting from cafes, voices rising in languages I had never learned. For the first time in years, I felt the air fill my lungs without the weight of someone else's need pressing against me. I walked slowly, letting the rhythm of the city move me forward, my suitcase bumping gently behind. In a quiet cafe near the Seine, I opened my notebook and began to write. Not just about betrayal, not just about loss, but about the journey. I wrote that love without respect is not love, it is servitude. That sacrifice without gratitude becomes a chain. And that sometimes the bravest act is not staying, but leaving. I thought of Jason, of Emily, of the years I had poured into their lives. There was sadness, yes, a dull ache that may never fully fade. But I also thought of the girl I once was, the dreamer who wanted to see the world, the woman Richard once held close and believed in. She was still here, waiting to be remembered. The bitterness softened into something else, resolve, perhaps even peace. My story was no longer about what they had taken from me. It was about what I had reclaimed for myself. To anyone listening, I would say this: you have the right to draw a line. You have the right to keep your dignity. And sometimes, the most powerful step you can take is the one that carries you away from those who cannot see your worth. If my story has touched you, I invite you to share it. Like this video? Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. And most of all, remember that love should never cost you your self-respect. Because in the end, I didn't just walk away from a house. I walked toward myself.